Starting. And we are live. Hello, everybody. This is the Varian Grant channel.
Is it?
Yeah. This
the
is my
official
channel.
Varian channel.
Yeah.
I'm gonna draw a picture of you dressed as Varian from Fantastic Journey with the tuning fork gun. You really need one of those. You really need one of those. That would be one of those little inside jokes that only old curmudgeons like me would figure out. I've seen that gun before. Especially with it lit, it would be cool.
Let me let people know that we are live.
We are live. If you're in the chat, you can say hello. Is there anyone there?
I'm letting people know now that I'm live, and then I am going to go onto my Facebook and also let people know that I'm live. So
I need a Zim Geek logo up there. It's instead of a Flint Comics logo. Started working on the cover for number 100 today.
Did you?
I did.
Oh, can we get a sneak peek, or do we have to wait?
Let me see if I can pull the camera out far enough. Oh, well, you can't see that picture. I had to put that down. Nope, that's you. Trying to aim it at the other screen. No, you probably can't see it. Past the other. I think I can't pull my camera out far enough. What happened to my cord? Oh, you're making me get up. There's a cord. I'm gonna pull it out a little farther. Here, wee. Dang it.
Whoa.
Can you see it now? Can't see it now.
Yeah.
It's probably not. That's it. All that effort for nothing. There we go. A logo and a number 100. I'm working on it. There we are. Oh, back in the chair. It's been a rough couple of days between car trouble and the wife had I won't say it was a heart attack. It was a arrhythmia problem. Her heart was beating too fast and it wasn't sitting in rhythm right. And I spent yesterday at the hospital through the emergency room. They kept her overnight. I just got her back home. She's sleeping upstairs.
How's she feeling?
Oh, she's doing a lot better. She's doing a lot better. They put it back into rhythm right off the bat, and then the cardiologist, I think, wanted to make. Well, I probably shouldn't say that on the air. Wanted to make a little bit more money off of her, but they were fiddling around with the drugs, and they decided she was going in for a ablation anyway, where they enlarge a artery, and kind of shock the heart back into a regular rhythm or something like that. That seems to really work on her kind of case. She was going to go in a few months. They're going to step that up, so she's probably going to go into it next month. So just to try to keep all this stuff from happening. Her mom had a bad history of medical problems because I think more because they were using her to try out the latest drug than anything. She ended up having a series of strokes, and we're really trying to avoid any kind of that medical problem here. But her mom was on all sorts of different drugs. They kept taking her down to U of M in Ann Arbor and fiddling with her, and she bounced in and out of hospitals and had a stroke, bad stroke that she survived for about 10 years on, and then kept having a bunch of mini strokes, and eventually the body just gave out. So that was about 2 years ago. Well, it wasn't even 2 years ago. That was last year, because we inherited her book collection. I think I told you about that.
Yeah.
The third floor is all a wonderful library of paperback books. So,
I do have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Now watch. I'll have this. This will
Oh,
be a
if
lot more uh organized than it should be than it normally is on Indie Vault. But people who don't know exactly who you are Randy Zimmerman. But Randy, you've been around for a while, and I remember. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know you've worked at Caliber at one point, correct? Oh, did I lose you? Are you coming back? He'll be back. Well, Randy worked at Caliber, and he there he is.
there you are. Now you're back.
Yeah,
Kinda.
yeah,
Are you there? Yeah, yeah. There you are.
yep, yep.
Yeah. You're. What's that? You're buffering on your tablet? Is that what did that?
I have no idea. You dropped out for a second and then you came back. So
No, you froze. Is what
did I?
happened. Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
just stuck there. I was about ready to send you a message in the chat to see if you could still get it.
So I was gonna say that
YouTube's glitchy. YouTube's been glitchy. That's
yeah,
our excuse.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not your it's not your little tablet and it's not my big honking computer. It's YouTube's fault.
You were originally at let's see. Oh, wait a minute. And I can't, for some reason I got some comments. I got some chats. But yeah, Randy, you worked at Caliber for a while.
Not really. I was freelancing through them.
Freelancing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was working for a lot. I worked for a lot of people back during the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So, but most of the time I was working for myself because I just couldn't get along with the boss. Even myself, I kept doing different jobs, different things, and I kept yelling at myself because I couldn't get any work out of the guy. He was too lazy.
You got a chance to be there for a lot of the Dead World books from Caliber.
Yeah, a lot of the Dead World books from Caliber I wasn't associated with. The Dead World books from Arrow when they first started, when Vince first started, I was really associated with. I was the art director back at Arrow Comics during that period, and I was the voice of King Zombie in the letters pages. That they were pretty crazy for the time. We were cooking letters in the oven and burning the edges off of them and mailing them to people, and people were mailing us back plastic fingers with red gook at the end of it to look like they had chopped stuff off. And nowadays you can't get away with that kind of stuff because if it ever opens up in the mail, all of a sudden there'll be a huge federal investigation about what we were doing. But back then it was a lot of fun. You go back and read the early Arrow Comics letters pages. That was all me.
Real quick, we have Tom Hinton watching, and Tom is an up and coming writer from Michigan. Even though Tom moves around quite a bit, but he said today Netflix sold costuming from the Defenders Punisher franchise at auction. Is this the literal death of anything that isn't Marvel/Disney?
If this what? Is it what? What was that? What was the question?
Is it the literal death of anything that isn't Marvel/Disney? Because they sold the Defenders costuming.
Oh, on Netflix? Oh yeah. On Netflix, definitely gone. Poof. The Disney Fox deal is through. Disney's pulling all their contracts. People will be lucky if whatever contract they sign, they'll still honor, but as soon as that's done, there's no negotiations. They're just yanking everything back. Same thing's happening with Stars. And I'm not sure how the Freeform deal is going to work because I think that's all Disney anyway, because Freeform is tied into ABC, which means Cloak and Dagger might still be around. Runaways will probably still be around on Hulu because that's all Disney now owns a controlling interest in Hulu. But they're still going to do the Disney streaming service, which is like, dudes, just convert Hulu. Yeah, there's too many. I love variety, but when it comes to streaming services right now, there's too many choices, and it's starting to get aggravating because the quality level on like Star Trek Discovery is millions and millions of dollars that they're never going to recoup unless they pull out more programming to make people come in on the service. And DC is getting better and better with every series that they do on the Disney Universe service, or the whatever, DC Now or DC Universe or whatever they're calling it. And it's really getting frustrating to the fans who don't want to pay that money to see those series, but really want to see those series, you know, because they've already got a Netflix account and a Hulu account, and you know, and Disney
Amazon
Plus, Amazon Prime. Yeah, well, I don't even count them. And you know, again, I've never seen an episode of their Nazi series or their Handmaid's Tale. I want to see it. I'd sit through it if I could get to it, but I can't, so I don't. You know.
Now, there was some news today on was it today or yesterday on Star Trek Discovery. Anson Mount and I forget who else is in there. Charlize Theron. They're leaving the show.
Well, Anson Mount plays Pike. And he's not going to be on the show for very long anyway, because it's about the Discovery and not the Enterprise.
Right.
So he's only there temporarily. They needed something to boost their ratings because, well, they're a stupid streaming service. And they're not. If they were to put the damn thing on CBS, they'd make ratings up the roof. And you'd have all of these big fans and they'd be selling merchandising like crazy. But they're on a whatever, $9.99 a month streaming service that only shows Star Trek Discovery, a couple of other original programs that nobody knows about, and some CBS reruns. Who wants,
Big Bang Theory,
you know,
right?
Nobody, huh?
And they got Big Bang Theory.
Who wants to watch that? There's no original episodes of that coming out. It's all just reruns. And it's all, you know, I Big Bang Theory is an embarrassment anyway. People are going to look back on that in 10 years and go, oh my God, we used to watch that show. Oh, holy crap. That thing's going to be so dated, it's not even funny. But, you know, I saw the first episode of the second season of Star Trek Discovery. They stuck it up on YouTube to try to get people to subscribe to their streaming service. And it's like, well, show's cool. I'd sit through the rest of them, but I ain't going to pay for your streaming service. Put it up on CB. Put it up on CBS. Lord knows Orville is getting the numbers right now because they are the only space on network television that's accessible. It's not because there's any huge level of quality there. You know, it's at the same level that Star Trek Next Generation was at back in 1980.
And Tom says
with nicer computer graphics.
Tom says that Pike was good for a ratings boost.
If they had it, yeah, they might have enticed some people. They threatened to bring Spock on. I think they've got somebody playing Spock on there for an episode or two, but that shows them the whole. If you get in to look at the Viacom Paramount mess that they've made of Star Trek, that's kind of interesting because it's turned into a gigantic cluster, and it's all their fault. The property split between Paramount and between Viacom, and they're acting like two little spoiled brats going, I can do this, you can't do that. I can do this, you can't. You have to stay in this universe while we're over here doing original stuff. And it's just turned into a mess.
Now, how many streaming services do you subscribe to?
That I subscribe to? None. Yeah. How many do I watch? I watch Netflix. I get it from my kids.
Okay.
And I could probably get Hulu from my son-in-law if I really pressed him for the code, but I don't have time for it. You know, I don't have time. I don't have time for Netflix right now. I haven't seen anything past Defenders. Punisher. I watched Punisher first season, but Daredevil second season, and Iron Fist, Luke Cage second season. I did watch second season of Jennifer Jones. I keep calling it Jennifer Jones. Jessica Jones. Jennifer Jones is an old actress. But yeah, there's such a thing as too much, you know. I'm too busy right now even to catch up on the DVR that I have on the free network shows. I'm a week behind on all the CW stuff.
I have Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, DC Universe, Crunchyroll.
Oh, Crunchyroll, yeah, for all that wonderful anime goodness.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
have a couple of them, and you're right. Oh, on WWE Network, and you're right. There are a couple times that I don't get to watch everything, but I cut the cord, and this is what I'm left with.
Oh yeah, you cut the. I still have Comcast because Comcast has a direct link to YouTube, so I can watch YouTube on my main TV upstairs or down here while I'm
Mhm.
supposed to be working. So
Uh,
yeah, but
let's
other than
see.
that, Netflix. See, I haven't seen what Altered Carbon. I haven't sat through the whole second or third seasons of any of the Marvel stuff because they stopped them. I knew they were canceled, so it's like, okay, well, I'll watch it when I get around to it.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of getting around to it. I got 100 shows to watch on the DVR first. That's how far behind I am. Got a whole season of I'm like 3 episodes behind on The Gifted. You know,
Okay.
3 episodes behind on Gotham, even though they're ending. So
Which I imagine that the gifted is not long for this world.
it's on Fox. They uh, who knows? Probably until their contract runs out, just like with the Netflix stuff. As soon as that's done, ink, they'll pull that back. It's a goofy show anyway. It's already gone and just about jumped the shark as it is. So
So today,
I watch it because it's like comic books. You know,
mhm.
it's just brain check stuff. I can sit there and have my dinner and watch an episode of The Gifted, and sometimes I laugh at it and sometimes I roll my eyes at it. So sometimes you just sit there and watch it. It's not bad.
So today, Disney started going through Fox, and they started issuing pink slips and laying people off. They're saying 4,000 people. Did you see this coming?
They saw it coming. They were talking back when they were negotiating the deal. Half of these guys, well, not even half, probably 4/5 of these guys already knew that their heads were going to roll. So I'm a little surprised that it happened this quick. I mean, as soon as the ink was dry, Disney's like, out the door, buddies. But Ethan's on there, Van Sciver's on there going, please let one of those be Kathleen Kennedy. Please let that happen. It's like, no, dude, that's not what Fox was. Right now they're going to go from the top down in the redundancies and get rid of them. They're not. I'm not sure what they're going to do exactly with Fox now that they have
it. And Tom makes a good point. He says Fox Films was kind of bloated. They did have quite a few different things going on. So
well, the Fox Marvel stuff, if he's talking about that, they padded that their schedule on purpose to look bigger than what they were. Because the more you pad that schedule, the more money you can make. It's just like Disney went out of their way to make sure things were really calm during the negotiations because they had all of these outside investors that they had to please.
1 second, I'm gonna plug my tablet so it doesn't die. But keep talking, I can hear you.
Okay. Not sure what you want me to, jab around about, but the whole Fox thing, it everybody knew. All of these Fox guys knew that they were, the one they had already gone through and interviewed all the employees. Most of these guys got severance out with packages that are going to run them until the end of the year. So it's just like my wife getting laid off from Quest. She still collected a check until the end of the year, gave her plenty of time to find a new job. So you'll see a couple of wonderful little production companies spring up, and some of these guys will, stay busy and do more business, hopefully better business than what they were doing at Fox. I mean, Fox had depending upon which level of Fox you were at there, it was just whatever level of mess and miscoordination that you could do. Warner's needs to be taken over by somebody. I'm kind of hoping that the new head that just stepped down will hopefully the new guy coming in will make a difference. But both of those companies need to go through and fire everybody in their comic book divisions just to start over. It's such a mess, and they're not losing as much money as IDW, but they're still not making the money that they ought to be making.
Yeah,
because they're not doing. They're not
stepped down, and he because he stepped down amid scandal. But yeah, I mean, you got a point there. There's going to be a little bit. There's going to be a couple more heads that roll. The Fox Disney merger.
Now that it's finalized, I think you're going to see a lot of huge changes over this next year. People getting kicked out. I think they're saving a lot of the Star Wars stuff for the Star Wars celebration.
There was a joke online, but I believe it's true. They have a parking space at Disney labeled Sony, and one of the Sony executives said that Sony is considering selling Sony Film within the next 2 years. And could Disney buy Sony without the government stepping in and saying, okay, wait a minute, you're too big now?
Well, they were really worried that buying Fox would have that happen with the government, with all the governments. I guess they had to go all around the world. All the major countries had to okay the deal, which was why it took as long as it did in order to get finalized. You know, you can't, these megacorps are just going to get bigger and bigger until they're told that they have to split up. I think Elizabeth Warren was already making a noise a week or so ago, probably because she could get a headline out of it saying that AT&T and Amazon were too big. So all that really does is stifle competition, creativity, and it, especially with Disney. I think Disney's demonstrated that they now can control not just the market but the media, especially with the Captain Marvel fiascos that's happened.
And Tom asked, what about DC announcing that the New 52 was destined to fail? Have you heard about that?
When did they announce that the New 52 was destined to fail? Is that a new announcement, or is that something from 4 years ago when the New 52 first come out?
I'm not sure. I'm going to look it up, but it was...
Everybody's saying the New 52 is now the New 22.
It's going to be the few five in a second if they don't get their act together.
Man, they're just... We've had that discussion before. I don't know if you posted that or not, about DDO and Lee and Harris firing everybody underneath them because... you know, those were the guys that could go before they had to leave. So, but yeah, but all of the CV, Cebulski, and all of the Marvel editorial department all needs to be shifted and changed. And I'm shocked that Disney doesn't see it. You know,
changed, fired. Go ahead. I'm putting some light on me.
That's a polite way of saying pink slipped. Yeah, but that. You know, you got to start putting some talent up there, people that actually can generate some cash for the company. Or why is the company keeping it around other than the fact that they have to keep the icons alive? You know, and they're figuring out they don't have to do that with the funny books. They can do it through the cartoons and the every other media under the sun. That if they can't get the comic books to sell, just shut the whole line down. That's what everybody's afraid of now, because as soon as Marvel shuts their line down, all of the retail shops are going to shut down. There goes a whole section of, or there goes a whole genre and format right there. Boom, gone. But they've been stagnant for the last 30 years. You know, there's something wrong with an industry where you have to do a product that fits into a specific plastic bag so that you can stash it in a box. You know, or slab it in a big piece of plastic you can throw across the room. There's a problem. That's not what comics were made for. Comics were made to be read. They were made to be lost in, entertained by, and you know, the lowest common denominator destroyed. And you know, Marvel and DC, they, especially a lot of them guys that have been in the market for a while, think way too much of themselves. You know, it was always a trash media. Comics were always a trash entertainment media.
Speaking of comics,
and the company that gets back to that, that's why Alterna is so exciting. The company that gets back to that and starts moving volume, because the key when you're a trash media like that is moving volume. If Alterna starts moving volume at all, they're going to be dangerous. They could reset the market. Of course, they're selling newsprint comics for $1.50, $1.99.
Yeah.
he's working on raising his quality. Some of that stuff's kind of readable now, and he keeps going with the quality level that that's out there. Oh, it's not that talent pool that Didio thinks doesn't exist. If they start tapping into some of that, that company could be dangerous in 2 to 3 years if the retailers are still around.
Right. So. Speaking of comics,
there you go. Yeah.
Now Randy put this book out. Randy, when did you put this out?
Oh man, when did I put that book out? 2000, I think, 2002. Open the front cover. There's a copyright in it.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah,
2002.
Yep. It got the PO box and everything here.
There's 150 of those floating around somewhere, unless somebody's burned some.
I got now. Could you tell us a little bit about this book? I know that everyone doesn't.
Well, back in the 80s and 90s, I was really heavy into doing self-publishing alternative stuff, and I developed a bunch of properties that I could take around to promote to publishers, to show the quality of work that I could do. So during that time, I developed a lot of properties. I took 3 of the properties that I really liked and put them together into that book with an explanation as to what they are, what I did with it, where I was going to take it, and how the property jumped into obscurity. It's 3, well, technically 2 examples of bad publishing, because the comic company, one comic company printed 2 of the properties. The third property was a failed attempt of a color comic that almost ended up in Walmart. I mean, that was in line. The New Breed, the guys that are on the cover, were destined to be in Walmart, but the product that was there before me literally blew the business right out from underneath my feet, because the quality on that book was so bad. I lost out because of their bad. It's in the book. Their bad example.
So if you'd have went first, it's a different story then.
Oh no! Hey, I could have been crappy too. Back then it was long before you did colors in the computer and you had any type of a quality level. Everybody was playing around with different ways of doing coloring. So my book, once it was printed, could have looked absolutely crappy, but the property that came before me kind of removed all doubt as to their quality level. So when you can see that, when you can see the lines with where the magic marker was, there's
one of my favorite books and favorite stories in here is the story you tell with the New Breed here.
Yeah. Yep. That was the property. That was a lot of fun. Sure.
Yeah, and I really like the artwork in there. It's
that was penciled by Doug Lampersky, who's a guy out of Pennsylvania. It's really, really good. I haven't seen him do anything else. He's probably out working in video games or some other. I hope he's still doing some sort of artistic endeavor. So, but he was really good. I stumbled across him. Man, I think he sent some samples into Arrow Comics, and I said, "Hey, I got an idea for a superhero property. Let's go."
Yeah, there's a picture right there. Some of their artwork.
Yeah.
Lampersky did. No.
Yeah, that's his pencils, my inks. I wrote lettered and inked that. I did everything but the base pencils on it, on that property. Everything else was me.
That's all. That's cool.
That's off of an idea for a series, a maxi series that I wanted to push to Marvel at the time, that I wanted to call Young Americans. I had an awesome idea of there being like another X-Men team group of kids with the same outfits, because at the time X-Men was New X-Men, and like the old X-Men outfits, everybody had the same costume on, but everybody had these crazy powers, and they were going around being trained by the guy who used to be U.S. agent.
Okay.
And he was brought he was brought into this corporation. They had these kids there that were gifted, and U.S. agent thought that they were just mutants, and they weren't. They were clones, and they were clones of other heroes that were already out there, of other Marvel-based heroes. and one of them turned out to be Magneto. And the way the series went as U.S. agents training all these kids, and they're like fully grown adults, but they're acting so immature. And there's petty drama, almost like what you see in comics nowadays. So and so said this, so and so said that, and he was constantly trying to put out fires with all of these kids that had these huge, immense powers that he was trying to train and to get them to control. Well, come to find out, these were all quickly grown clones that everybody had done in test tubes. They had all gone around and found DNA samples of these different superheroes. Mm-hmm. Some of them were mutants. They all had natural powers, grew them up to full grown level, and wanted to do their own army of these characters. And the way the Maxi series would have ended is Magneto would have found out, because one of the kid's mask would have fallen off, and Magneto would recognize himself as a kid or as a teenager and just go absolutely ballistic. So issue 12 would have been him just tearing through the complex and just screaming everything, and finding all of the clones and proclaiming them to be abominations and just killing them.
Well, that'd have been a short-lived series at that point.
Oh yeah, it was meant to be. I was going to call them the Young Americans, off of like the Young Allies. Mm-hmm. And have them as they were a group. You'd get to know them for 10 to 12 issues, and then Magneto would come in and just mow them all in, and then turn to the guys who were running the complex and basically give them a 1-page speech about never doing that again, and it being a travesty against humanity, which would have been funny, a funny contrast against his political stance about Homo superior. Mm. He would have labeled them as Homo inferior,
right,
and not and not as abominations, because they were clones. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, The Fool is another book in here, and I think that The Fool is I like the art style for this book. This book is
that's Chris Tyson on that. He did all of the work on that. Okay. All the artwork. I gave him a script. He did all the artwork. And again, he's one of those guys that I hope is still out there doing artistic stuff. He had a very individual style. So yeah. He'd have had a hard time finding work at Marvel and DC because he was so stylistic. But he worked really good for The Fool. He had a good lighthearted style to his stuff. The Fool was a goofy, really started out as my answer to the Punisher. Because if you were going to go around and fight urban crime, you'd have to be nuts. And so he's a guy who's mentally unstable, or seems mentally unstable, who fights crime using practical joke weapons like a yo-yo or a weighted rubber chicken and all sorts of stuff like that. And anybody he tied up for the police, because he was still a believer in the judicial system. Anybody he detained for the cops, he'd take a section of their clothes and incorporate it into his action suit. So if anybody asked him if he had any mutant powers, he'd always tell them that he had the mutant power to sew, because his costume was always a patchwork collection of trophies from his other successful adventures. And he was very, very acrobatic, very much a dumb luck, funny man type character. And I developed him completely without knowing that Siegel and Schuster had a character named Funny Man, who was pretty close to that, except not, officially mentally unstable. Mm-hmm. He was kind of a comedian character that would run around and do practical joke type stuff while he's fighting crime. That lasted, I think, 3 or 4 issues that they did for an independent publisher after Superman. I had no idea that property existed until just a few years ago.
Now, you about 10 years or so ago, I was doing research and contacting people. I was trying to put together a convention and bring people who had influenced indie comics, years ago, to this show. Uh-huh. And one of the gentlemen I ran across was Kevin Sambidia. And he had... Are
we going to go into those stories?
Well, we could. Yeah.
No, go ahead. What you were saying.
His name was Kevin Sambidia, and he was he helped get the his company did the first Ninja Turtles board game. I think it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. I think that was the name of the board game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I emailed them, and they sent me an invite to come out to their office. And
Palladium Books.
yeah, Palladium. That's right. Yeah. And I showed up out there unannounced.
Mm-hmm.
They had invited me, but I didn't set up a date when I was coming out.
Yeah.
So I kind of showed up, and they were gracious enough to walk me through the facility and talk to me. They spent way more time than they had any obligation to
Mm-hmm.
sitting down with me. And I'm geeking out because they're showing me all this stuff from the past and sketches, and I'm like, wow, this is actual history.
Right.
And so, and then I think about 4 or 5 months later, I met you. So I'm I'm trying about everybody who's kind of seen this industry change and evolve and crash and rebuild itself and crash and rebuild itself. And we're on the cusp of, I think, another crash again, right? Would you think that's fair to say?
Everything runs in cycles. It's a big chain. Especially the comic industry, is a big chain. One link leads to the next link, leads to the next link.
Did you ever get a chance to do any business or anything with Palladium Books?
Do you remember did you ever post the story that I told you about where I was at a New York convention and saw a kid get ripped by Neil Adams? Critiqued?
Mm-hmm.
Did you post that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, back when I was in high school, Kevin did that to me.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's wet behind the ears kid. And he just tore my stuff totally apart. And there was that kept me out of comics for about a week and a half.
Did it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It just completely stripped any respect for my artwork or it was pretty much you shouldn't be in this business, kid type of a talk.
I didn't know that.
Oh, well, I got lots of stories, buddy. But it was one of the big lessons that I learned about growing a tough skin. And that's why I still don't do really harsh reviews on people's stuff. I don't look at them and go, kid, you shouldn't be in this business. Mm-hmm. Because it's obvious you don't know such and such and so, because you can always learn if you have the ambition to learn. And all that did was grow, thicken my skin up a little bit after time. It took me a while to get past it, to decide that, screw that guy. What's he know? All he does is gaming books. That's, I want to do comics.
Yeah.
So especially in the independent market, Kevin did do A+, I think, which was one of the first real independent comic magazines out of Detroit. It's just that he found more profit, I guess, in doing gaming books. But I've done spot illustrations for other gaming companies, but I never worked for Palladium. No.
Tom says that the first thing was the first office is on Lanyo Ave. On Lanyo Avenue, the first office over there. I remember that.
I bumped into Kevin at a convention because he had done A+ comics that I had found, and I wanted to be part of that, and he didn't want me to be part of that. So, and like I said, it took me a while to get to the, well, F him, I'm gonna be better than that. It's not the way to encourage talent. And I might have caught him at a bad time or whatever, but nobody needs nobody who takes the time to go to the convention and talk to somebody like that deserves that kind of a dressing down.
Have you ever had to do that? Have you ever had to tell somebody to step away from the business though?
No, I don't tell anybody to get out of the business. Heck no, because I'd tell them, well, you're not quite there yet, and you need to work on this, and this. But I'm not going to say, dude, your stuff sucks. I'm never going to tell somebody that. Not unless they were fooling around or something. If we're joking around, dude, your stuff sucks.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell some kid doing that because I've had it done to me. I'm not going to do that to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to get anybody out of this business. I want to have everybody in this business, because Joe Blow, who might not have his anatomy together 3 years from now, might figure out some key way to do some sequential art that nobody's ever thought of before. I mean, to do some storytelling that nobody's ever thought of before. And boom, you know, all of a sudden this guy becomes a major talent. But there's been so much talent that should have been in comics that got chased off. I mean, video games wouldn't be where they're at now. And fantasy art and painting wouldn't be where they're at now. Anime, especially American anime, wouldn't be where they're at now if Marvel and DC actually cared about the talent that they were supposed to be fostering. You know, and they chased off more people than, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again. These kids come up and they have specific characters that they've always dreamt about working on, and then they start working at Marvel or DC at one of the secondary books, and then they get a good taste of how exactly the professionalism up there works, and they get out of the business and run over someplace else. Animation's another good example. Paul Dini, you know, not Dennis Cowan. Oh, the really good. A lot of these guys from animation, that Warner Brothers and Marvel ended up picking up, are all frustrated comic artists that tried to break into the business and couldn't get through because of the nepotism. You know, it would have been amazing to see like a Paul Dini at the level of Frank Miller, you know, but instead Paul did animation.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys,
you know, or a lot of these guys just got out. I know a number of people that were really gifted that you know ended up working for UPS or FedEx because they got frustrated because they couldn't break into the market, even though they were really talented.
Do you think some of it's gatekeeping?
Oh yeah, heck yeah. The majority of it's nepotism. It always has been, though, because you've always had a little group of people up there that were in control, and they wanted their buddies to work with them. So it's not a matter of talent level. Well, look at Marvel and DC today. Holy crap. That's just an exaggeration of the exaggeration of the exaggeration of the exaggeration from back in the 70s and 80s.
You know, I made a post a couple of weeks ago on my page, on my personal Facebook, and I said there was a belief that when a artist or a writer or whoever it is comes into the industry and takes a seat at the table, that someone has to get up and lead the table. And everyone else, I think I did it as a poll, and people said, no, that's not true. That shouldn't be the way it is. But you talk about the nepotism that's involved in comics, and I believe that there are people who are in comics who actually do believe that, and that's why they gatekeep so much, because, like you said, they want their buddies there, and they don't really want.
Well, comics history to me is just super fascinating. And back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, you had to there was a gatekeep. Well, back there in the 40s, you only had a certain amount of talent anyway, because because of the war, the majority of the guys were over fighting, you know, and back then it was a guys club. You didn't have very many females working in there. You had some working at the bullpen and that, but even through the 60s and 70s, that was happening. It was a guys club. That's why during the 80s, you had so many, you know, image circle template females, you know, everything had to be done, and everything was all done in circles. But when you had the scantily clad girls, you were dealing with mostly male power fantasies, where back in the 50s and 60s, you had romance books running and science fiction books running and crime books running and all of this that were stifled by the comic code. But the problem is that, in the way that I look at it, is that if you want to work in comics, figure out how it's gonna how you're gonna make a living at it. You know, you can't just be competent doing the work. You have to also be competent on being able to pay your bills. And if you're going to work in the independent market or the alternative market, you have to get by with less,
right?
You know, or you have to make the market work for you. And that's, you know, I've never wanted to be a cog in a machine. You know, there were times that I wanted to draw or write different characters, but I've never wanted to be a little cog in a great big machine. It's just not in my nature. So that might be the 60s hippie in me or whatever coming out, but probably 70s hippie. No, I don't know.
I remember like Arrow Comics was, because I know I've gone to conventions and you've been with you've had the Arrow Comics banner up still, and you guys have a lot of the books. So Dead World started at Arrow, then moved over to Caliber. Is that the way that happened?
No, Arrow started in the mid 80s to the late 80s. And I want to do I've been trying to get all of these guys together over at my house so that we can record a bunch of little interviews that I want to put up as on my YouTube channel, because there's so much of that history that nobody is aware of. That back in the 80s, Ralph and Stu decided that they were doing a fantastic fanzine, is what it was called. A little, because everybody did fanzines and appas back during that time, just to get their stuff printed and show it around to their friends. And who knew that the whole industry would end up being at that level? But they decided they wanted to do a black and white comic, because black and white comics were starting to pick up. Cerebus was out there. They wanted to do a comic line. So they settled on the name Arrow. They started looking for properties to print. And they had some ideas, but they for example, they used me and Sue Van Camp. We had a property together that was called Tales from the Aniverse. They let us go first so that we could be their guinea pigs, so that they can figure out the system. And while they got their products up and together and running, while they found the talent, they were writers and good writers, really good writers. That because a lot of these guys back then, it was learning School of Hard Knocks. You'd kick out a comic, you'd get a reaction from the fans at a show, or people would send you in letters. It wasn't like the trolling that you see today, where 3/4 of the people go, "Oh, your book just sucks." Everybody was out desperately looking to be entertained. So if something come out, especially that was marginally different, there was pretty good reaction to it, and there was some really honest quality critiques, not like the tearing down type stuff that we were talking about previously.
Yeah.
So you had a bunch of guys out there that were kicking out a bunch of really different and trying a bunch of really different things. That's back when Fantagraphics was doing Love and Rockets, and we were doing every book that come out from Arrow was a different genre on purpose. None of this stuff was going to be interconnected. Everybody owned their own stuff. It was very much a communal situation. Ralph and Stu owned The Realm and Dead World, and they hired Guy and Vince to work on it, and then they paid them once they got paid back from the distributor. Mark Bloodworth created Night Streets, which was an urban crime drama. Realm was a fantasy book. Dead World was a zombie book back when nobody was doing zombie books. Nobody was doing zombie books. Tales from the Aniverse was a funny animal space opera. Then they did a superhero book called System 7, and we had a couple of other products planned. But the thing with Ralph and Stu is it was with Arrow Comics the first time through. It was a group of friends that had just gotten together. We would have pizza parties every Friday where we would all get together and look at what each other was working on, and we would encourage each other and critique each other in a serious, intelligent way. We got better because we were all working off of each other. And that includes writing and scripting and all of this. But we were all friends, but there wasn't any business there. The money was constantly coming in, but not a whole lot of people were, Ralph and Stu were busy being creative end and not working on the business end. And at that point, some of the distributors started collapsing. And once they started collapsing, they left Arrow in the lurch with a whole bunch of money, because they never chased after the bills like they should have. I mean, they should have had an accountant and a lawyer, and they never did, And then they ended up not having any money. So they had to shut down Arrow Comics after a while. I went off on my way and started self-publishing some stuff before, right as a lot of that stuff was happening. But they decided they had to shut down publishing. So they ended up giving, in compensation of the money that they owed them, they gave Dead World to they gave Dead World to Vince Locke, who was the artist. on Dead World, and they gave Realm to Guy Davis, the rights to the property, because they felt bad that they didn't have the money that they owed them, because when Glenwood went out, they owed them tens of thousands of dollars.
Ooh.
And then Sunrise went out, and then they owed them, you know, a marginally less sum, but it was still in the thousands of dollars.
Wow. That's
So it was like Wile E. Coyote running off a cliff and then suddenly realizing there's nothing underneath them, you know, because that's the way that worked. So they ended up shutting down Arrow Comics the first time, giving those properties, because Mark always owned Night Streets. Sue and I always owned Tales from the Aniverse. They gave the other properties to Guy and Vince, and Gary Reed had his own chain of comic shops at the time. And he decided to start up Caliber. And one of the first things he did was he paid Guy and Vince money for the rights for Realm and Dead World. And that's how Realm and Dead World started being printed over at Caliber.
And at this point, Gary discovered James O'Barr, correct?
Well, let's say that Gary printed James Crow. Yeah, O'Barr's Crow.
Okay.
I don't know how much of a discovery it was. It was kind of a mutual friendship. And again, back then, everybody was still friends. I'd pop down there to the Caliber offices once a week or once every other week or so, and we'd, you know, rub shoulders and see what needed what done. And, you know, I did a lot of lettering work during that period and some inking work, and did a couple of little short stories for Caliber at the time. But most of the time I was out trying to print my own stuff or out looking for other work with other companies. So I never really went in and tried to get a regular gig from Gary. He had a lot of people that kind of glommed on, you know, especially right after Crow became big. Yeah, he got a lot of attention, had a lot of people come in. So I was always, I would pop in occasionally, you know. In fact, me doing War of the Worlds for Gary solely come out of Gary going, you should write something for me. Why don't you pitch something? Because, you know, Gary was like that. And he saw that, you know, I didn't have anything on the fire at the time. And, you know, I quickly pitched him. Well, plus we got Gary was involved with the New Breed and the Walmart deal. Because Gary was always out looking for stuff to do. So I did New Breed for him. And then after New Breed, and that deal kind of went into nothing, Gary told me to pitch some stuff. And one of the first things I pitched him was War of the Worlds, and he was all for it. It was good to go.
You know, I remember last time I seen Gary was at a convention, and you know, we exchanged pleasantries, and I think I made a couple jokes, and then you know, days later he found out he had passed, and that was heartbreaking, because, you know, you used to see him someone at a convention all the time.
It was a shock, yeah, to have him pass.
Yeah. Instrumental in starting helping start Detroit Fanfare.
Yeah, the Detroit Fanfare, yeah. That only ran what, three shows?
Yeah, 3 shows. Yeah, 3 shows. I was at the first and the last one, the first and the third one. I didn't do the second one. But
before that, though, Gary had ran a few shows on his own.
Did he?
Yeah, he did a Detroit show. I want to say it was King Con, was what it was called. His mascot was a stuffed teddy bear the size of King Kong. And he had all of the artists at the time, especially the bigger artists in the Detroit area, go through and do a illustration of a cartoon teddy bear. I'm pretty sure it was called King Kong. He did that for 2 or 3 years. And that was a fun show. Everything was fun back then. Nothing was too serious. And yeah, it was mostly a boys' club, but you know, it was still fun.
That's, you know, and again, the history there, you know, for all you guys, I see, you know, some of it to me is I would love to have been there and watch some of that take place, especially, you know, because I I see people with Dead World shirts and they got the Dead World drinks now, and I'm like, that book came from Detroit, and it's to me that's like you know
That came in 85. Go find out when Walking Dead started, because we still have talks about what Kirkman knew or did not know, because the first couple of Walking Deads are so amazingly similar to Dead World.
Mhm.
And but you couldn't they couldn't match Vince Locke's unique style. That was a cool thing about the early Arrow books. If you ever get to go back and really look at them, that everybody had their own they weren't just their own genre specific books, but everybody that worked on those books had their own super unique style that was very much their own. Guy Davis's stuff was anime oriented and very amazing stuff. Vince's stuff was very artistic, very, we all had our own little amazing niche that we all just stayed in and did a lot of really good quality, a lot more quality work than people want to give it credit for.
Mhm.
And Ralph and Stu are a lot better writers than, they went on to do Oz after that and found, got in line with Bill Bryant and did Oz for many, many years.
Now, I don't know if you would have had access to this information, but at the time when Arrow Comics was going, was there ever any interest in Hollywood?
Oh no, this is long before a lot of that stuff picked up.
Okay.
We had I seem to think there was a media deal that came down, or somebody wanted to use one of the books in the background, but that was about it. There wasn't any real media interest. Well, we didn't do it in the hopes that it's not like today. We didn't do these products in the hope that it would become a movie or a TV series. That was rarely even a possibility back then. We did them because it was fun. Realm was based off of Ralph and Stu's D&D campaign. Dead World was off of their love for George Romero. That's how it even started. You know what there needs to be? There needs to be a real gory comic out there with zombies that are eating people. That would be awesome. And that's how that started. Aniverse is very much Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge in outer space with real, with characters with real emotions, with animal characters with real emotions to them.
Mm-hmm.
Night Streets was an amazing urban crime drama that I always told Mark Bloodworth that he should have pitched it around to some of the movie studios, because that would have made a heck of a TV series. It was a crime drama that involved female superhero character, and the main crime boss was a 7-foot tall cat. It was an amazing story. It was great. Gary ended up printing the whole thing of Night Streets in a couple of volumes. Night Streets ran for, I think, 5 issues back when Arrow Comics had it before they shut down, and then Mark went through and finished off the story.
So now I still see, occasionally I see the Arrow Comics banner still at some Comic Cons. What are they doing today?
Well, Arrow was always a commune. Like I said, it was a communal situation. So a few years after Arrow shut down the first time, they tried coming back again. They did a few issues of The Dead because, that's where their interest went. And, Jason Moore come in on it and a few other people. And I was out doing self-publishing stuff on my own at the time, and was, I'd help them out every once in a while if they asked me to do a lettering job or whatever. But I was more interested in doing my own stuff back then. And then a few years after Arrow 2.0 shut down, all they did was 2 or 3 issues. I think 2 issues of The Dead. 3 was produced. There's the third one's been printed in an omnibus volume that came out a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. But a few years after the second attempt at Arrow shut down, I wanted to get back into doing black and white comics, and Ralph and Stu were doing Oz with Caliber. They moved Oz over from Caliber to us because of whatever creative differences that they were getting at that time. And we ran, we started up the third version of Arrow with me and a retailer friend of mine from Saginaw. Mm-hmm. And we ran that for years, 4 or 5 years, a lot longer than the other two versions of Arrow combined. We ended up kicking out almost 60 different issues of stuff. You know, a lot of miniseries. We tried an anthology book. We did War of the Worlds. Tried a second story of that and got 2 issues printed out of the 5. Wonderland had 3 issues. Dark Oz had 5 issues. Land of Oz, which Ralph and Stu left, another writer came on, but Bill still stayed on the art, even though he recreated everything. They had kind of a almost like a reboot, Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of thing that happened, and the Oz restarted with all new designs and stuff because Bill went through and redesigned everything. That ran for 11 issues. We did a lot of one-shots, tried a lot of different genre stuff because, you know, that was always Arrow Comics to me. You know, somebody would bring us a product and we'd try it and see how it ran, or I wanted to do something. Eventually I ended up doing Spank the Monkey through there for 4 issues and then a 3-issue miniseries when I got fed up with printing everything and decided to tell everybody, you know, I was done with the business and thought that they could go take a flying leap. So I finally did a 3-issue Spank the Monkey and got out. Then we collected the War of the Worlds stuff I did with Caliber because I own the rights for that, and stuck that out into a reprint book, and then did Zim's Heroic Tales, and then stopped Arrow altogether. Ralph and Stu have tried to bring Arrow back a couple times. There's a few other little Arrow comics that have come out there. I put the Arrow Comics banner on a Owasso Taco House Funnies book that I did a few years after we shut down, just to do it, you know, just to keep the Arrow name alive. And Ralph and Stu are now in control of whatever they want to, you know. Well, they were always the Arrow name was always on loan from them anyway when I did it. So they've got it back, and every once in a while they'll try to do something with it, but they, you know, sometimes they'll print an article or so. We just did a 30th, just about 2 years ago, we did a 30th anniversary book that they sold at Motor City Con, where a group of us all got together and did different covers for it. But it's a part of comics history that nobody's aware of, that's all local, that not very many people are aware of. Its Caliber came out of that and was bigger than Arrow ever was. You know, I did comics under Massive Comics and Weebee Comics for a while. Had a little bee character that we printed a few issues of Anniverse with, you know.
Like for me, the 3 companies that I was aware of when I first started, you know, getting into indie comics and then trying to break in myself was, you know, Arrow, A Plus, and Caliber. Those are the 3 companies. And now, you know, obviously, you know, it's kind of a different landscape now.
I think A Plus is so familiar because I think Kevin just printed the heck out of that book, and it stayed around for years. He did a couple of issues of that. So my first printed work was out of a book very much like that out of Chicago called Just Imagine Comics and Stories. So that's where I had my first stuff printed, and that series printed. They printed Bill Mesner Loeb's, the Doug Rice for the first time, who went on to do Dynamo Joe. I want to say Gustovich had some stuff. There was a Vosberg cover, Mike Vosberg at one time, who was a big professional that worked for Marvel and DC for quite a few years. There were a lot of big people that come out of Just Imagine Comics and Stories. I was really happy to contribute to that. And again, that sprung up because I wanted to. Mike Gustovich was doing Justice Machine, which was a superhero book that I wanted to be a part of. I tracked him down. He was supposed to be at a show in Grand Rapids, and I drove the 2.5 hours over to Grand Rapids, and he wasn't at the show. But Dennis Messinger was there from Just Imagine Comics and Stories, so he took a look at my stuff, which was really cartoony at the time. And yeah, there was a lot of flaws to it. He says, dude, you got to be printed. Just send me a story. I'll print it. So I sent him. It took me a few months to do up a story. I sent it to him. He printed it. So
That's cool. Okay.
that was.
Do you have any copies of that?
That was the bug. Yeah, I still have a couple copies of it. I've redrawn that story. That's the tale of the Lindy Jacks in the old tin box.
All right.
That was the first story I did. Pardon.
And now, so how soon after you did Spank the Monkey on the comics market till Flint Comics started? A couple years?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was probably 2003 to 2008.
Okay.
So during that time, I had a my own screen printing company that I was part owner of. I was in it with two other guys called All Star Screen Printing. There were some months we made a lot of money, but there were a lot of months we didn't make any money. So that's my main source of income through the Arrow Comics days was all working as the art department at different screen printers. So I was a professional rubylith and amberlith separator for a while. I could do full color separations long before you were able to do them in Photoshop. I can do them manually so that they could burn silk screen so that they could print them on shirts.
Right. And that's when they were using like the big plotter machines and everything.
Oh no, I did all that by hand, buddy.
Wow.
That was all. They had what they called rubylith and amberlith. I still got some scraps of it here just for nostalgia's sake. That was like it was a dark red or a dark yellow sticky saran wrap that was on a metal backing, and you had your black and white art that you laid on the board. Then you taped it. You had registration marks in a couple of places, a couple of odd places. Then you laid a sheet of amberlith down. Then you took your X-Acto blade and you cut the ruby or the amber part of the saran wrap, and you peeled off the stuff that you didn't need. And then the ruby or the amberlith wouldn't allow light to pass through it when you went through and exposed it to a hard light onto a silk screen. And then you washed out the stuff that wasn't exposed on the screen. And then and it was on a mesh, a silk screen, you know, and then you could pass ink through it.
Huh. Yeah.
That's how, with a squeegee, you know, that's how shirts were printed. A lot of companies still print that way. So even though now they've got the technology for, you can set a shirt up underneath glorified inkjet printer and have it print at full color on a shirt anymore.
Yeah.
That'll do all of the graduated tones and stuff that used to take me forever with the dot, figuring out the different sets of dots in order to, so that once it was printed, there wasn't a nasty moire pattern printed there or blotchy color or whatever. So
you did that now.
Pardon?
When you started you started Flint Comics, issue number 100 is coming out a couple weeks from now. So you're gonna have it out. When do you think it'll hit stores? Well,
hopefully start of April if everything goes right.
Okay.
We'll see. Knock on wood. You know, it'll be stuffed too. It's gonna be it'll be a big thick issue. I'm just gonna I might even print a few extra, make it a few pages thicker. You know, it'd be okay to have a nice thick paper out there for, you know, just for I don't want to say old time's sake, but just for prosperity.
Yeah.
You know, so I've got about an extra year's worth of comic strips that I could print in there that I have the rights to print. So
that would be cool.
I might load it up. So
hey,
we'll see what happens. Right now I'm caught between doing issue 100 of Flint Comics and working on the Formar Nature Trail signs. They're real eager to have that done before the end of April. So I'm going to be doing the hard dance for a while, which is why I haven't had a whole lot of content up on my YouTube channel. So
that's right. Yeah, and your YouTube channel, you talk about comic book history, and you have cartoon lessons on there.
Yeah, it's a Zim Geek channel on YouTube. I haven't put anything up there in about 6 days, but I'm set to do a cartoon instructional video next, and then I promised to do probably a rant, another rant about Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers this time. Probably Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau. Kind of a discussion. I just saw somebody had done one of those up on YouTube, and I'm shaking my head at it and going, dude, that you think you're being funny, but really what you're doing is being, you're misinforming people as to what actually was going on. But comic history is such an amazing thing because very few people actually kept track of it. And a lot of especially the older history, you have to rely on everybody's memories, and everybody's memories are based off of their own experience. That's why you have these constant arguments over what Stan Lee did and did not create. Because everybody has a different memory of what happened in the past. There's even stuff with Arrow Comics that we talk about that one person will remember it one way and somebody will remember it a completely different way.
Yeah,
that's why I want to get these guys together under one microphone and have them, kind of argue it out and get it down on video, have it up on YouTube. To sit there for all time that somebody might stumble across someday and go, oh my goodness, there was an Arrow Comics. Look at this. This is pretty crazy. What do you mean there were zombies in 85? There was a zombie comic book in 85 that reads amazingly like Walking Dead. That kind of thing.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that if you guys did that, if you guys can get everyone together to do that, that would be really interesting. I'd like to see that type of documentary or
because there's a lot of things that come out of Arrow that a lot of people don't really realize. There's a lot of talent that Arrow founded, just like there's a lot of talent there's a lot more talent under Caliber. I mean, somebody should have sat down. It would have been interesting to see Gary have kept a diary of some type about the different people that he's run across over the years, because he was out there printing a lot of stuff from a lot of people. And I think he printed just about everybody at one point or another. So there's a lot of stuff in Caliber and a lot of stuff you don't see anymore. Out of Caliber that, I keep meaning to go through my long boxes because I've got a bunch of that stuff just to scan it and show people. One of the things I'm going to do on my Zim Geek channel as soon as I get a chance is, 10 comics you've never heard of that were phenomenal. Stuff like Xeno Zero and Ismit the Dog Avenger, and just oddball stuff that really captured me when I was back in the 80s and 90s when I was reading it. You'd see these guys kick stuff out and you go, man, that's a really cool idea. Fish Police. How many people remember Fish Police? Very few people even remember Troll Lords, and that was a big property.
Now, you were around for do you remember when ElfQuest first started at all?
Oh yeah. Back here's my story, my ElfQuest story. Though Richard doesn't seem to like me anymore for some reason, but my big ElfQuest story is here in Genesee County. I had the first comic shop in Genesee County.
Okay.
Long before anybody else had it. It's back in the late 70s, I would say 77, 78. I had a comic shop that was in the back of a pinball arcade that I would get direct comics from Big Rapids distributors who nobody remembers anymore. Then they were out of Big Rapids, Michigan. You had a direct distribution out of the East Coast with Phil Suling, out of the West Coast with Bud Plant, and you had Big Rapids distributors coming out of Big Rapids, Michigan. They'd have oddball comics and mainstream comics shipped to them, and then they would ship it out to individual bookstores and head shops, retail outlets. Anybody that wanted to sell direct comics could order comics from this guy. You just pay your bill, and you'd get the next week's worth. And there were no minimums. There was no buy-in that you had to do like Diamond does now, where you got to have $3,000 worth of pay them $3,000 worth of inventory or whatever in order for them to even consider you as a customer. You just called up. Jim Friel was the guy's name. He ended up moving out to the West Coast and working for Bud. I don't know what he's doing now. I'd call up Jim once a month. I'd send him his catalog back up and say, I need 3 of this and 5 of this and 6 of those, and he'd ship them in. one of the first alternative comics that I got from him was Cerebus #6 and Fantasy Quarterly #1, which was the first ElfQuest book. I mean, the very, very first ElfQuest book.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember freaking when we ended up, we were bored running the store, but we had made a little money, hadn't made a lot of money. But what had happened is the guy who owned the pinball arcade, actually, we caught him in the store one time, in our section of the store one time. He had just broke in, even though he owned the building. And we caught him behind our desk looking at our books and realizing how much money we were making. And he was going to start charging us rent. We quickly shut the store down, as opposed to pay this guy rent, because he was, you know, if you know Tales from the Aniverse, there's one of the main characters in Tales from the Aniverse is JB Space, and JB Space was patterned after that guy. That's honest truth. Like I said, we didn't want to pay him, but once we shut down, we still had comics that we had ordered, because just like the direct market now, you ordered comics 3 months in advance. Right. And we were freaking because we had already shut the store down. We had one more shipment to come in. He was not going to take it back. And we had a whopping comic bill that we had to pay that had Conan #100 in it and a few other comics. And we had no idea how we were going to cover that whopping comic bill of $100 back to Big Rapids. Looking back at it today, it's like $100, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but back then it was our, you know, we had no idea how we were going to cover that. But back then also, you know, we took the big chance and borrowed $200 in order to run some radio advertising. That ran for a week. We made a lot of money during that week. It upped our visibility like crazy, because you only had 3 or 4 really good radio stations in town and 4 stations on the television, and it's long just before cable come in, you know, as a regular thing.
Now, you mentioned your because Tom just asked if the original Captain Marvel was a guy, and your channel, you talk a lot about the history of Captain Marvel, there being more than one Captain Marvel, matter of fact, there being different Captain Marvels at different companies besides Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
So
it's an amazingly long and curious history that personifies a lot of the politics and stuff that mainstream comics have always had. A lot of guys getting greedy, a lot of guys taking advantage, a lot of guys, you know, making money any way that they possibly can. So Fawcett was the more research I do on it, somebody needs to do a book on. I can see why there was a really tight, and there still is, real tight fan club for Fawcett Publications, because those guys were really interesting back then. So right. the more research I do on them, the more affection that I have for that company, because they pulled some stuff. Marvel or DC National, when they first started publishing, they did Master Comics, and the big character in Master Comics was Master Man, and I don't even mention that in the series that I did for the Zim Geek channel. But Master Man was a ripoff of Superman.
Okay.
National, just like Amazing Man, wasn't it, from Amazing Comics? Right. That Eisner had created. They did Master Man, guy picking up a big train and all this stuff. National sent them a cease and desist, and they stopped. So after 6 or 7 issues of Master Comics, they pulled Master Man and they brought Bullet Man in instead and printed Bullet Man stories. Well, then they had Wiz Comics. They decided to do Captain Marvel, and Marvel sent them a cease and desist again, and they went, no, because when Wiz Comics come out, first issue of Wiz Comics come out, they felt that character was different enough from Superman that they didn't have a case, and National never pursued it, which was part of National's problem, which seems to plague them. They have no, back then, Yeah, you were just printing these funny books for a dime, so they didn't care. There was no respect for there's really never been much respect for the industry in general, even from the industry insiders of the art form that comics are. But they let Captain Marvel go. They didn't say nothing until after the war. They figured that the courts were tied up with whatever Nazi sympathizers or who knows whatever war problems that they were having, their problems with rationing or whatever. And during that period, Fawcett took Captain Marvel and just kicked everybody's ass with it. Just mopped up the floor with little Billy Batson yelling Shazam, and he was so popular. They did Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel and 3 Lieutenant Marvels and an old grandpa that used to dress up as Captain Marvel, and anything that they could come up with to cash in on that Captain Marvel name. They took Captain Marvel and turned him into a bi-weekly. He was coming out every other week. They were selling, they got up to 1.4 million copies consistently every issue. So they were moving.
And you got to point out too, that was in the era where comics were returnable, right?
Oh yeah. That's back when they were returnable. They didn't get that many comics back. There were a lot of comics that were sold. That there also during the 50s, there were a lot of comics that were burned. That they had whole meetings of people that had sworn that comics were responsible for juvenile delinquency. They'd have everybody in the town bring their comics together and have a big bonfire once a week.
Yeah.
So that's why your golden age comics are worth as much as they are today. It's because they are rare. The stuff that they used to print millions of, at least hundreds of thousands of. You see those pictures nowadays of the kids sitting on the newsstand. Take a look at the actual amount of comics that were there. There's stacks of comics that these kids are sitting on that are like that deep or so. That's the same issue. Kids are just sitting on them, reading them because they, kid gets up, next kid comes in, throws the dime down, takes a book and runs,
Yeah.
That happened. They moved a lot of product back then. And there was a lot of product in the 50s that got burned out. Just burned up, fried.
Wow.
So, and that doesn't count for, that doesn't account for the kids going through and tearing them up and that kind of stuff. Nobody thought, these comics would be have any value. That's why it's so rare. There's only a half a dozen copies of Action 1 that are in existence today, let alone readable, let alone in any collectible condition. If somebody finds one like that find that they had where somebody had taken a Action 1 and read it and stuck it inside of a movie magazine and thrown it in their dresser drawer, they pull it out and they're flipping through the magazine and there's an Action 1 that falls out. There's $1.5 million. Boom. That's why those stories are so rare. It's because those books are rare. It's not because there wasn't a lot of them printed. It's just that most of them were destroyed or burned. So, but yeah, Captain Marvel is an amazing name. It was going to be Captain Thunder, but Johnny Thunder was over at DC and they thought it was too close. It was going to be Captain Marvelous. Then they just cut it down to Captain Marvel. Even though Marvel Comics had come out, Marvel Comics 1 had been out the year before that. They still called him Captain Marvel. Then Timely Atlas still printed Marvel Comics. But they had Captain Marvel Adventures. That's why
Fawcett was in danger of getting it from DC and Timely at the time because they said
nobody had copyrights on that stuff. Nobody. That's why the court case with between Superman and Captain Marvel in 48 lasted as long as it did, because they went back and said, oh yeah, you say you own Superman, prove it, pull out let's see the trademark, let's see the copyright. That's why they didn't know how to do that stuff. Who knew this stuff was going to be valuable at all? You look at the Superman books back then, they went through and filed a patent on Superman because it was ripped off so much. They filed a US patent on the thing on the idea in order to keep other people from ripping them off, because this was, trademarks and intellectual properties were literally in their infancy at the time.
Wow. Well, that's a U.S. patent on a comic character. That's crazy.
Go look. It's there. Go look at the old Supermans. You see in little letters underneath the logo, you know, the curved Superman logo. It says U.S. patent pending.
Wow.
On there. Yeah. Heck yeah. I'm sure they probably tried to do the same thing for Batman, but after a while, they just says, just copyright the things. Come on. Put a trademark on it. TM. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Or a little C in a circle. Come on. Or register it as a corporate mark, you know, and put an R in it. But you know, that's the business. That's the way the business. That's why it's so fascinating to me, is that it was so neglected.
Right.
You know, and so frowned upon or looked down upon, or, you know, when that ties back to my youth and growing up, and the way comics were looked at when I was a kid was like, I always saw them as art. Nobody else did, though. I always saw them as art.
So anybody listening, Randy, let them know where they can find your YouTube channel at. We know it's Zim Geek, but
just type Zim Geek in the search bar. I'm there.
All right. And
I got a whopping 83 subscribers. I could use a lot more, but you know, I'm not really going to go out and push the channel until I'm able to put a lot of content up there on a real regular basis. And that'll happen here in the next couple months, as soon as I'm past some of these commercial jobs that I should probably be working on now instead of talking on the phone. Well, it's already what, midnight. It's a little after midnight, so
yeah, we're getting ready to wrap it up. That way you can get to work or
no, I'm going to bed, dude.
Yeah.
it's been a rough couple of days. So
yeah,
especially with the wife in the hospital, and I'm having a little car trouble, and yeah, anyway, I'm having to deal with the Formar stuff. So
well, let me let our visitors, our watchers and visitors, let our watchers go to bed themselves.
How many you got? How many we got? Hey, thanks for watching.
My phone, because I know Tom was.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything popping up here in my chat at all. The last thing I got is me going, "Hello, speak to us."
Yeah, I don't know if they can see that chat, but I know that I was watching on.
You have a whole nother chat.
I was watching on my phone,
right.
And I got a couple of different chats, and I got a couple things. Like I said, I got
hey, cool.
Yeah. So
thanks, Tom.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I'll make
maybe someday we'll have more people.
Yeah.
Listen to this old fart and that Varian guy.
Yeah. Varian guy asked him a lot of questions, but the question needs to be asked because some of these things I don't know. So, you know, if I got a ability,
and again, it's all a matter of, you know, neglecting or what you've experienced. Or nobody's got a textbook. There's no textbook on the history of comics that I know of that's totally reliable. Everybody's got their own version of what happened in comics history or what they remember or whatever, and you just kind of have to weed through it. You're seeing as more time goes by, you're seeing better products, at least. You know, there's people out there that are realizing that a lot of this is an oral history and not a written history of stuff that they should have kept track on. But hey, it was funny books, you know.
Right.
Who knew this stuff was going to be worth millions? Who knew Shazam was going to come out? You know, that's another one of them products. It's movie. Lucky to have the TV show. Look, as dorky as it was, you know, but boom, here comes the Shazam movie. You know, they're working on New Gods and Eternals. Never thought you'd ever see those. And man, let's hope, knock on wood, that you never see the New Gods movie. But wow. That needs to be an animated feature, that like Heavy Metal. But you know, that's my opinion on the first Heavy Metal movie. Was amazing. They need to do why they don't do more of that and stick it in the theaters, or especially now that there's a streaming service, there's not more serious animated cartoons out there. It just amazes me.
Yeah.
You know, you're lucky if you see Archer, you know, and that's kind of a serious comedy.
Yeah. Out
there, but there needs to be that. Believe it or not, when Batman the Animated Series first started up, Fox played a couple of episodes in prime time just to see if it would run.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it, and
nobody knows.
Taken quite seriously.
Yeah, and then stupid Cartoon Network only lets Young Justice run for a couple of seasons because they can't sell the damn toys.
Yeah, now it's on the DC streaming service.
Yeah. Well, they can sell the comics. There you go.
Yeah.
But and yet they still print and they still have Steven's Universe out there. Who the hell's buying those toys? Adventure Time I could understand, but man, Steven's Universe?
Yeah.
Wow.
Steven Universe is quite popular. It has a big fan base though.
Really?
Yeah. I have a.
And I can even see My Little Pony because you can have the little ponies running around. But all these Brony characters just stun the hell out of me.
Yeah, and those guys are passionate too. But I have a Steven Universe print that sells pretty well at conventions that I take. So.
Oh yeah, but that's because there's not a whole lot of merchandising of that stuff out there. People walk by and go, "Oh, Steven's Universe! I love that show. I've got a," because they don't know any better. You look at these kids now. These, I'm teaching kids at cartooning after school for the 21st century latchkey kind of program. I'm having these kids draw characters. They have no idea who they are. That's funny though. They're sitting there. We're drawing a frog, and they think it's the frog. They think it's Kermit, or they think it's the frog from some learning software somewhere. Nope. Here it is, Hoppity Hooper, kids. Write that down. Show that to your grandparents, and have them go, "Oh, I used to watch that when I was a kid." So, I love doing that. It's fun. That's
and if people want to watch that or be a part of that, they can do that by going to your channel and taking the cartooning lessons that you do.
Yeah, and every even one is a cartooning lesson. Every odd one, and we're talking about odd geeky stuff. So
all right, and then so I'm gonna end the chat here, but obviously we'll record it chat here, and that'll everyone who's watching will be able to tell us goodbye for now. And then obviously, me and you will still be connected, or we won't be live anymore. So right. Okay, thank you. Randy, you want to thank everybody for watching, or should I do it?
No, hey, let's both do it. Thanks everybody who watches this. Thanks for hanging around. Hope you had some fun. Yeah, let us know. Give him a like. Subscribe to his channel. Subscribe to Zim Geek too if you get a chance to get over there.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the bottom of the video.
I sent that package to Peter Cimetti. He gave me 6 new subscribers. That was so worth it.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I'll get up there to where I can get monetized on YouTube.
Oh man,
sticking it out there.
You'll be making 2 videos a day.
I ran across a guy today I never knew existed. Comics Explained. Have you ever heard of that channel?
Yeah.
Comics. He's got 1 million some odd number of subscribers.
Yep.
I'm looking at that thing going, where did he come from? And that I'm sitting here listening to this guy's video, and I'm like going, half of these guys that have these YouTube videos, you just want to reach at the screen and choke the crap out of them and go, dude, you really need to get to know what comic history is about. Because you're and granted, everybody sees it from their own perspective, and that's kind of hard for me to remember. Because, I've seen it since the 70s. I grew up with it in the 60s and 70s. But, man, some of the stuff that they pull out of their rump about, so-and-so is this or so-and-so did that. It's like, dude, that's not how that went down. That's not how that happened at all. So maybe someday I'll list myself as an official comics historian and actually do a textbook like a Steranko book. Somebody needs to go out there and interview these guys really quick before everything passes,
Yeah.
And too many memories get too faded. If you get a chance, the Tomorrow's book, I don't know if you've seen that. The Tomorrow's kicked out Enough Said book. That's what it's called. Stuff Said is what it's called. STUFF Said, where they actually had I can't remember who did it, but they did a good job. They went back through all of the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby interviews about who said what about what when.
Yeah.
And it breaks it down for all of the talents and the times that, like when Kirby was being so shafted with the art, he went out and said some crazy outlandish stuff because he was ticked at Stan for going out and saying crazy outlandish stuff. And Stan would go out there and just figured that it's funny books. Nobody cared. Yeah, I created Hulk. Come on. That kind of stuff. You could just run out there and grab whatever. And that's the stuff that's the misinformation that everybody remembers. You know, everybody labels it. Like I said, comics history is real fascinating to me because it's so messed up.
So messed up.
And the industry is so messed up. The industry has always been a mess, and as more time goes by, the crazier and more messed up it seems to be. So
yeah, and it doesn't seem like it's gonna get any better. Well, that's it for now, everyone. Me and Randy can go all night talking about it, but we're gonna
all night
so you can all get to work in the morning. If you have to work in the morning, it's
the comic bitching marathon right here. We're hitting our 20th hour as we speak. Now, here we go. Yeah, hey, thanks.